So rude of me, I apologize. Okay. Here we're talking about eating from the tree. And I'm telling everybody how bad it is and how God didn't like it. And the whole time I'm just chewing away in front of everybody. But I was going to say the pears are delicious this morning. Okay, if you come to the class, you get a pear. Okay. Does anybody remember what we talked about on Yom Rishon?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you want to tell us, or should? Okay.
Talking about the difference between witnessing firsthand and witnessing from knowledge.
Right. So in Kiddush on Friday night we have this interesting feature where you mention both the same thing from both perspectives, first person and third person. You say that God bequeathed to us the sanctity of His holy Sabbath, and you say, God, you have bequeathed to us the sanctity of your holy Sabbath. Meaning first it's His holy Sabbath, and then we say your holy Sabbath, right? And we said that is two references to two aspects of testimony that are on the timeline of a Shabbos day. That there is the Friday night, which is third person, which is God bequeathed to us, and there is Shabbos day, which is first person, God, that you have bequeathed to us. Why? Because on Friday night, there is a testimony to something special about Shabbos, which only is retained as the level of testimony known as knowledge. But during the day, there is a manifestation of testimony that's on the level of witness of seeing, which is more direct. This was experienced through the man, that the man was given a double portion on Friday. Now, any time you collected a double portion of man, it rotted. If it was more than you needed, it would rot at the end of the, meaning you never got to it. Okay? So here you have a double portion, and what happens is that going into Friday night, you ate your one for Friday, but there's one now for tomorrow because it doesn't come on Shabbos. The sanctity of Shabbos is manifest by the fact that God doesn't deliver the man on Shabbos. So He has to deliver it twice on Yom Shishi. Okay? So going into Shabbos, you have a piece of bread that you left it out, or they didn't put it in the fridge, right? And it was meant to be good. Mm-hmm. And when they woke up Shabbos day, indeed, that which they got yesterday survived till today. So now they see that it's for today, and they understand last night. Now they know post facto that last night, they know about last night it was for today. Okay? So the level of Shabbos that is manifesting Friday night is but you don't see it yet. You see it tomorrow when it hasn't melted. Okay? And that's reflected in the third person, first person, which are these two elements of witnessing, whereas you could be a witness if you know something to be true, which is the level of Torah as a witness because we're given it from Moshe and he's trustworthy. And there's the testimony of Shabbos, which you see it with your own eyes, you know to be true, which is the level of Torah that empowered Moshe to give us the rest of the Torah, which we witness with our own eyes by the Luchot. And both those issues of Luchot and Torah are mentioned in the davening of Shabbos day to say that these are the two issues, the two modalities of the Kedusha of Shabbat. There's knowing the Kedusha of Shabbos, which is only Friday night, and there is the seeing of Shabbos, of the sanctity of Shabbos day. Okay? And that seeing is what makes the halachot of Shabbos day preferable in regards to the honor of Shabbos. We said that if you have a choice between honoring at night and during the day, you honor the day more because that level of testimony which is being manifest then is a higher level because it's the seeing, it's the luchot. Okay? So that's what we talked about on Yom Rishon. Does everybody remember that? The more ways you twist it and turn it in your head, the better you know it.
Right.
Okay? You just take all the different permutations and iterations of the building blocks. Okay, but those are the parallels. All right. So let's find where we are inside. Okay, and we said that really also, just a minor note, that we looked for a description of the contents of Shabbos primarily in the Kiddush of Friday night, because the Kiddush of Shabbos day is really just a derabanan. You don't even fulfill if you would use that for Shabbos night, you wouldn't fulfill your obligation. There's only really one obligation according to the Torah of Kiddush, that's a Friday night, and the Shabbos day was just a kind of ritual that the Chacham gave us to honor the Sabbath day. Okay? Yud Aleph. V'zehu pesher davar yichudo shel kiddush to Shabbos shechachris. That is the explanation of the uniqueness of the ritual sanctification of Shabbos at Shachris that you make on a cup of wine. Mikol hadvarim hatunim kos. From all the things, all the rituals that Chazal prescribed for us that require a glass, a goblet of wine, harehu hayichidi she'en bo shum seichel letochen inyano. To be mekayim the mitzvah of Shachris Shabbos Kiddush, you don't need to mention anything about Shabbos. It's just, you just say Bar Piragafen and you're good. Okay, so that's a very minimal, low way to honor the Sabbath. But now we understand why, because it's just done. It's just done. The whole thing is just done to honor the Sabbath. The fact that Chazal say, you know what, the honor of Shabbos day demands that you make a Kiddush too. What do you have to do the Kiddush? You just have to say Bar Piragafen, but you have to do it to honor the. So that's why, because you don't really need a Kiddush. Ukimo she'amadnu al zeh be'ot bet, like we have explained, discussed in the second paragraph. Ki halot ta'amah shel takana zo shel kiddush miyuchad l'shachrit Shabbat hu ba'adifuto shel kavod hayom al kavod halayla. That the whole reason why there was a rectification or an assigning and a fixing of a ritual kiddush for Shabbos day was just out of consideration from the rabbis to honor the day. Adifut zo eina el adifuto shel haraya gabe hayidiyah. Why is there a preference, a prioritizing of the honor of the Shabbos day? Because that is where the seeing is manifest, as opposed to the regular knowledge of testimony. And since both aspects of seeing and knowing are included in the contents of the Kiddush at night, in truth, even the marking, the significance of what happens Shabbos morning was already included in the Kiddush at nighttime, which is a Dioraita. So really, the Kiddush at night mentions both third person, first person to allude to the seeing of both the knowing at night and the seeing of Shabbos day. Okay. We're just restating what we restated. Okay. Ella, rather, shal gaba shal tachlalot zo, on top of this inclusion in the Kiddush of night of both these aspects, bahi takanat hitpartut b'shah shemigia habepol shel kiddush Shabbat. But still, on top of that, the Chachamim decided that when it actually happens, at the moment that it happens, Shabbos day, when you enter the state of riyah, of seeing, that's when it's appropriate to make a kiddush also to mark that. V'al kain, therefore, bahi takanat kiddush shel Shabbat shachrit. That's why the rabbis brought us the Shabbat day kiddush. In this form that doesn't even need to include any content, because it's not coming to add anything. Everything was already included, we said, in the Kiddush itself, which is only needs. Really, what is Kiddush? What's the point of Kiddush? There's two things. There's three issues of Kiddush. But really, there's the Kiddush of the Torah is that you mark when you come into a day of sanctity, a 24-hour period or a 31-hour period, if you go according to the Arizal, then you go in, start marking it with a statement that it's sanctified, and you end it with a havdalah, separation. Because if you don't have that separation, then how are you marking? How are you bookending, right? So the Kiddush and the havdalah work together. So there's a need to say Kiddush at the beginning, at the onset, right? So that's the Kiddush of Friday night, and that has the contents of all the aspects of Shabbos, because you're saying Hayom Yom Shabbat Kodesh. The mandate, the obligation to sanctify the Shabbos means that the Torah says you have to say today is Shabbos. You have to be aware and make a statement to declare that today is a holy day, which includes in it all those aspects of testimony that we talked about. So when you come into Shabbos, you make a Kiddush, and that includes all those things. Okay? So that's Kiddush versus, in contrast to Havdalah. That's really what the obligation of Kiddush is. Now, the Chacham said, you know what? These different modalities that are occurring over the course of Shabbos, we will mark when Shabbos hits the height of a level where it's giving, someone who keeps Shabbos is partaking in giving testimony to the world that there is a direct connection between the Creator and the creation in keeping Shabbos. you're now hitting the level of seeing as opposed to just knowing. So Chazal gave you another Kiddush to mark that. That's another function. That's the function of Shabbos day. Now there are those that make Kiddush 3 times on Shabbos. They do it by each of the meals. Right? Now the obligation from the Torah to make Kiddush Friday night has nothing to do with the meal. However, Chazal say you cannot eat. We don't allow you to eat till you fulfill that obligation. Therefore, your eating is reliant on the Kiddush. So we always start off the meal with the Kiddush. Also, the meals are meant to honor Shabbos. So it comes together with, meaning we're saying we're eating this meal, not because we're having a meal, but because we're honoring the Shabbos with the meal. So we put the Kiddush and the meal together. So you start off Shabbos, you make Kiddush first. You can't eat beforehand, so you make Kiddush to eat. But you also make Kiddush at the meal, and that's the law. Chazal say, Kiddush b'makom suda. That the Kiddush, let's say you make Kiddush, you fulfilled your obligation, but you can't eat unless you make a Kiddush, meaning you have to make Kiddush at the meal to mark that it's a meal for Shabbos. Okay, so those that make 3 Kiddushes, they make a Kiddush by each meal. So they make a Kiddush also, Sudah Shlishi, but they do it in the Sudah.
After
not
the Motzi, you mean?
Right, they don't do it before because there's no need, you're allowed to eat that day. Right? When you wake up in the morning, you're not allowed to eat before you make Kiddush.
Right.
So you have to have Kiddush also, right? But Sudah Shlishit, it doesn't function. The only reason for the Kiddush of Sudah Shlishit is to mark that this meal is specifically to honor the Shabbos. And that's why the content of the Kiddush, of the third meal that people say, is the Parsha of the Man that mentions the word today 3 times. It says Hayom, because Chazal learn out from that part of the Torah where it says today 3 times, that there's a need to eat 3 times. So the first time it says, right, Vayomer Moshe, Ichlu Hayom, eat it today. Hayom, today. That means make a meal Friday night. Ki Shabbat Hayom La Hashem, because today is Shabbat for God. That's the Hayom, the second day. That's the second meal. And then the third meal, the third Hayom. The word today is Hayom. Today, Lo Timtzeu Basadeh. You're not going to find it because God gave you an extra portion before. So the third meal, the reference to the third meal, the Hayom, actually the words are today Hayom Lo. Okay. Now the Rebbe Rashab from Chabad uses that as a basis to say that the truest way to honor the Sudah Shlishit is actually not to have a physical meal, not to eat. And their custom is specifically say it's such an exalted time. And the reason why I'm mentioning this, aside from all the ways that it's connected, is because here in the Pachad Yitzchok we're going to explain out. Remember that this whole Maamar is coming to explain now why, that if we have a trajectory in terms of the linear, the timeline of Shabbat, that you have the night, and then you have the day, and then you have the afternoon. And it's going to an apex of holiness. Remember, we saw that it's mirrored, it's reflected in the contents of the prayers, as the contents of Friday night is the Shabbos of Bereshis, when God, right, the first Shabbat, right, Zech Lemasa Bereshit. That's already without context of a relationship of giving it over to anybody. The Shabbos day we talk about Shabbos that was of Matan Torah, that we have a Shabbos that was given in the Torah. That's right. And the contents of the third prayer of Mincha, of Shabbos day, is all about how ultimately the Avot will rejoice and the world will reach its tachlit, because it's about the Shabbat of Latid Lavo, of Yom Shekulo Shabbat, right? So that's supposed to be the highest time. And the Pachad Yitzchok asked, then why are the demands, the halachic demands of the meal that's meant to honor that time for Sudah Shlishit the least, that you don't even need to have Lechem Mishnah? That's how we started this whole thing. Right. You're going up in terms of holiness like this, and yet in terms of the obligations of how to enact that in practice, in terms of the halacha, seems to be doing less and less. So that when it comes to the third meal, you could eat some fruit, you can make a Bari Priya Eitz, and you sing Mizmar LeDavid, and then you run to Mariv. Okay, what? It's the least respected. I mean, how many people serve Sudah Shlishit on China? But there are plenty of people that serve all the other meals in China, but for some reason, those that serve on China, right, they'll get the plastic plates at Sudah Shlishit with like a little tuna salad.
I mean, it's a beautiful expression of the fact that we're more spiritual at that stage, and therefore we don't need the materiality.
But it casts aspersions on the physicality and all the great, luxurious ways that we honor the previous meals that we say is just for the Shabbos, it's not for us. In fact, another piece to this the Chozeh Lublin, the seer of Lublin, one of the reasons why, the Hasidim have the custom to refer to the third meal not as the third meal, but as 3 meals. Shalosh Su'udot. Right? We say there is the first meal, the second meal, and then Sudash Lishit, the third meal. But actually the Hasidim say Shalosh Su'udot, also known in the parlance, right, in Yiddish as Shalosh Su'udot becomes Shalosh Sudas. Okay? So why is Shalosh Sudas? Those that, right, why should... So why is it called 3 meals? That's what the Seer of Lublin asks. So he says that the first meal, there's no way for me to know that I'm not doing this for my own enjoyment and my own honor, and this is for Shabbos. Because I need to eat dinner. And lunch, I need to eat lunch. But by the time I get to Sudash Lishit, I can barely eat anything at all. Right. I don't eat it because I need to. I'm clearly doing it to honor the Shabbos. And that shows that all 3 meals were to honor the Shabbos. So that at that point it becomes, that's what he says, Sudash Lishit. So I'm saying from that point of view, then, you should have as much an extravagant meal, the third meal, as you do the others, according to that reasoning. There are all kinds of customs.
But it's like the afikoman, really. It's like the afikoman that you have to eat it without being hungry.
That is the most beautiful thing I ever heard in my entire life in the past half hour. That is so amazing. That is so amazing. What's the afikoman? This is fun. We're going to get back to the Pachad Yitzchok in a second. But the afikoman is at the night of the Seder, at some point in the meal, before you wash for bread, you take the middle matzah. You have 3 matzahs. You have Kohen, Levi, Yisrael. You take the middle matzah, the Levi specifically, and you break it in half. And you say which is the bigger piece and which is the smaller piece. The smaller piece will be incorporated in the hamotzi that we make on the mitzvah of eating matzah. And the larger piece we hide. And we eat that as the dessert before we bench. Okay. So the afikoman. So first of all, you take this middle matzah and you say that that which we started, the process that we started of the geula by Mitzrayim is really 2 halves. There's a half that we're celebrating, that we're commemorating that happened in Mitzrayim, but it's linking it. This is a process that we're waiting till the ultimate geula, and that geula is hidden, and that's what we eat for dessert. Right? That's going to be the bigger piece, right? Mm. And the whole role of having a Leil Seder every year in the generations is to connect those 2. Mm-hmm. The Yachatz is one of the most important moments of the Seder, and it's specifically the Levi. Each one of the matzahs represents a different aspect of what matzah is, but the Levi specifically comes from a lashon of levaya, of accompaniment. And that's how God accompanies us throughout. There's this historical process. Mm. And that's how the Levi's matzah, meaning that matzah that represents the historical process of the geula, the ultimate galut and geula, is broken in half, and we're seeing that as a continuum. So Shlomo is saying that if the Sudash Lishit represents the Yom Shekulo Shabbat, La'atid Lavo, so we're saying that meal we're waiting to have, that's the Suda of the Leviathan that we're waiting to have with the Tzaddik. That's beautiful. I think you should write that down somewhere. But no joke, but let's see where he goes with it. But that's an approach to, meaning we're marking somehow in our enactment of these minhagim in the Torah, we're noting that somehow there's this incongruity that's supposed to reveal to us why the most ethereal of the times is the most ethereal of meals. Okay, so back inside. Okay, umipnei kach, and through this, I'm sorry. Vahi takana kiddush shel Shabbat shachrit b'matbea kazo she'ein ba shum tosefet chidush beguf hatochen. The whole reason for Kiddush Shabbos Day is just to honor the day. Also, that it shouldn't have less of an honoring than night. It should also have its own Kiddush, and that's the Rabbanan. And it doesn't come to include or bring to the table any new sort of aspect or information in it. It was all included in the initial Kiddush of Friday night. Kedei lelamedcha, in order to teach you, shekol zeh, all this ne'amar kfar b'Kiddush halayla, all of these issues, right, were included in the contents of the Kiddush of Shabbos night. Ve'en Kiddush zeh ba, and the Shabbos day Kiddush is only coming, el l'shem haskar, just to mention, shekvar nitkayem b'ma'arav, that mi ba'erev, that it already came, everything that is happening already came true or came into being at night. V'haven heitev, and understand well. Okay, so I think that point we understand well. Let's move on. Umipnei kach, and because of this, hinenu machriyim, we call out, we're proving clearly, ki ba'ofen she'ira milta velo kidesh b'layla, that in an instance, in a situation, that for whatever reason a person was unable to make Kiddush, sanctify Shabbos, Friday night, the Kaim Alan, we paskin lahalacha, the holecha makadesh kol hayom, you can make Kiddush the whole day. You have the whole day to make Kiddush. It's not that you missed out Friday night, you can't do it anymore. Dino sheyidalig legamrei al Kiddush hamiyuchad shel shachris to Shabbos. But actually what you have to do is, instead of saying the Shabbos day Kiddush, you don't say the Shabbos Day Kiddush, rather you say the Shabbos Night Kiddush, and that will be the Kiddush that you make that Shabbos. The whole presentation of Kiddush of Day is just going to say things, if anything, really, it's not coming to add anything, but everything really is said in the Kiddush at night. Memela, therefore, Kishuhu Omer et Kiddush Alayla B'yom, he'll say the Kiddush of the nighttime. During the day, Ein Makom the Kiddush Hayom Kol Iker, then there is no need anymore to make a day Kiddush. Okay? And now let us return to the beginning of the issues that we discussed. According to the opinion of many halachic decisors, there is no obligation to eat bread at the third meal of Shabbos. You don't have to eat bread. It is nice to eat bread. You should eat bread. It is good to have even lechem mishnah, but you don't have to, and you can still fulfill your obligation. And how great is this question, this wonderment, b'shinui ma'arechet hasuda mi ma'arechet hatfilah. With the changing, you see the change that you see in the arrangement of the meals, in contrast to the arrangement of the davening, the tefillot. The b'shloshet hatfilot shel Shabbat, because during the three prayers of Shabbos, Harei Hatfilah Dizman HaMincha, the contents of the prayer for the Mincha, He HaPiskal Shel Shoshet HaMadrigot B'Tfilat Shabbat. It is the apex, the climax, right, of all the levels, the various levels expressed in those prayers over the course of Shabbos. V'ilu b'ma'arechet hasud, but regarding the arrangement, the system that the meals play out in, Yesh kan harada, there is a lessening of levels, a lowering besuda desmana mincha vis-a-vis the meal at the mincha time, lu'umata madrigota kodmot, in contrast to the previous levels. Okay? Right. Okay. Amna. However, kfar nitba'er lanu, it has already been explained to us, ba'ot aleph, in the very first paragraph, ki hatchalata shel tmiyah zo, the beginning of this question, munachati, it rests on, it's predicated on benukuda kodemis, with a presupposition. Plot twist. These three meals of Shabbat, nafkalan, we learn them out. Mitzlata hayom denamru beparshat haman. In the parsha of the man, it says the word hayom today 3 times, and we learn out that each word today is a reference in the context of them eating the man, and it says today 3 times, talking about Shabbat. We note that you're meant to eat 3 times on Shabbat. V'im kein, and if this is true, mehechi teisi, how can it be? From where does it emerge? Nechalek ben hashavin, that we should, that which is presented in the words as all being equal, why should we start separating and making distinctions between them? V'nikal ba'achat mehen, and we should be lenient regarding one of them, l'umat chavrotea, in contrast to her peers. Why single? If the root of the obligation for the meals comes from 3 mentions of hayom, all those mentions are all the same mention, meaning it's not like we learn one from one place and one from another word, meaning it's all hayom, hayom, hayom. So why do we distinguish the last one to mean, yeah, in regards to this meal, the obligation is not so much? How do we know that? So the words of this essay are meant to portray through these gates of light this distinction between the third meal and its friends. The obligation to eat bread during the meals of Shabbos. The man, which God called bread, was how God honored and showed the sanctity of Shabbos in the Midbar to the generation that received the Shabbos, and we honor that. We don't have man, we eat bread. The bread that we eat is meant to be the man. That's why every child knows that we have a lechem mishnah to represent the man, right? And that's why you cover the bread on top and on the bottom, because the man came with, it was gift wrapped. Okay? So, ulefi hana'al, so according to that which we've been saying, daitam shel hanach poskim, it must be that the reasoning of those aforementioned poskim, dehach dumyon deman, that the bread that you eat has to be like the man, or a reenactment of the eating of the man. Ein inyana lihit damot leman mitzad atzma. It's not that it has to be specifically like the man. Ela she'inyana lihit damot leman b'makom pulato b'kedushat Shabbat. That it should serve as the role that the man had in sanctifying the Shabbos. What does that mean? V'halo pulato shel haman b'kedushat Shabbat eino ba ela b'shnei mekomot shehem kvod yom v'kvod laila. The man really was only, right? It was a double portion that came. There was one portion on Shabbat that came to mark two things: the distinction between the day and the night. Meaning the man was boker reitem, erev yadatem. That just like the man brought in this formula of experience, that it allowed you to experience knowing something and at night and seeing something during the day. The Shabbos has a parallel function, and therefore we mark the meals as using the man to mark the difference between the knowing of the night and the seeing of the day. And therefore the man only serves that function. The man does not serve, meaning nothing else happens between the morning and Sudash Lishit that's reflected in the knowledge, the awareness, the experience of Shabbos in terms of testimony that has to be marked by the man. So it's true, we learn you have 3 meals, but the element of the lechem in the meal, which is the man, that only served to tell us the difference between the modality of the day and the modality of night. Okay, I believe that's what he's saying. Okay? They're only coming to distinguish between the honor of the day and the honor of night. Meaning the honor of Shabbos, the sanctity of Shabbos day, is on the level of testimony, but it's testimony that you know. And then the honor of Shabbos day is manifest in the sanctity of a higher level of, it's being able to give witness now, you're bearing witness on the level of seeing. That's what happened in the Midbar, and you're reenacting that, and that's marked by, not by the meals, but by the bread in the meals. Okay? As has been explained in this Maamar. Now, not only is this a great head trip, I mean, this is fantastic, wonderful, exciting Torah for the mind, but now, when you actually go and have your meals, if you meditate on these things, it becomes more real in terms of what you're doing when you actually engage in these meals, and that's what you can marshal more of your awareness and your being in this act. Okay, maybe you have kavanot. Okay? Umimela nimtza, by itself, it turns out, it's found to be, from what we've said and explored, ki even though it's true that we learn out the obligations to have 3 meals to honor the Sabbath through the 3 mentions of the word hayom today in the section of the Torah that talks about the man, mikol makom, nevertheless, chovat dimoy hasuuda legufo shel man, the obligation for any particular meal of Shabbat to have for itself to have a similarity to the man itself, right? That is only relevant to only 2 of the meals, which are the first 2 meals, which are distinguished between the honor of the day and the honor of the night. Because each one of those, the day and the night, that's when the man came and did its work. It activated, it did its thing according to that particular aspect of that time period. In terms of separating time, shebein shachrit to Shabbat, bein mincha to Shabbat, to distinguish between what happens on Shabbos day, between shachrit and mincha, it's true that we get to an even higher place on Shabbos day, but that's not by mincha, but that is not something that has any bearing on the difference between, in terms of testimony, between seeing and knowing, And the man did not serve was not a mechanism for that. Meaning that's not a function that the man had. So the man kind of, if we want to look at, there's two issues in the man, in the parsha of the man. There's the man itself, and how that brings all these things of edut that we talked about, and the obligation for eating. Because we're talking about man. Man has to do with eating. Moshe was talking about how they're going to eat on Shabbos, and he said have 3 meals. But the man of the day was cut up, half of it they ate shachris, and then they had Sudash Lishit. But the man itself, as how it bared testimony to the sanctity of Shabbos, right? That was only something that occurred in the morning and at night. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that's what we're saying here. The role of the man in the Suudot is only relevant to Shachrit and the Laila, but not for Mincha.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? The man does not do anything, does not serve any role or function in terms of what happens in Shabbos from ramping up, from going from Shachrit to Mincha. And therefore, in the obligation of having a third meal, there is no obligation to have a representation of man. And therefore, we have no reason to obligate you specifically with eating bread. You still need a meal. Okay? Where are we holding time-wise?
You can finish the...
Okay. ונכונים אנו עכשיו להפוך לניחותא את התמיהה בשינוי סדר המדרגות בין מערכת התפילות למערכת הסעודה. And now we are prepared to actually switch our assumptions that we had that caused us to wonder about the difference in terms of the prayers going up and the meals going down. The Ma'arechet HaTfilah, that regarding the system, the arrangement of the prayers, Zman HaMincha Hu HaPiska. In terms of the prayer of the Mincha time on Shabbos, that is the heights, Shal Medregot HaKodmot, of all those that precede. V'ilu b'Ma'arechet HaSuda, but when it comes to the arrangement of the meals, Yeshkan Horada, there's actually a downgrade, Bizman HaMincha, when it comes to the Mincha, L'umat HaMadrigot HaKodmot, regarding those previous exalted levels. Shekain Mekilim Anu B'Suda Shel Zman HaMincha, P'turim Anu Oto Michovat HaPat. So it's true that that time is special and that there's a meal, but there's no need, there's no obligation for bread because there is no function of man. After we have allowed the contents of this essay to settle, Nimtzat lanu, it is found for us, Pekan hamarganita hagenuza, the hidden margarine. Hine bevadai shedagat ne'amanut benogea lavtachat ha'atid gedolehi be'ein aroch leumat madrigat ha'ne'amanut benogea lemaorot ha'ava. Check this out. This is wild. Okay, the level of faithfulness, of trustworthiness that has to do with future promises and assurances about the future are greater, much, much greater, in contrast to any sort of levels of trustworthiness regarding previous incidents. Meaning, God did a lot of awesome things for us, and He assures us that He's going to do a lot of awesome things in the future. Okay? And okay, so we have to understand what this means. So there is something called the trait of trustworthiness, being faithful. When it comes to how believable somebody can be, when it comes to laws of testimony, so now, listen, when you come and you give testimony in Torah, you can only give testimony on something that happened. You cannot come in court and give testimony in any binding legal way, right, about something that's going to happen. Doesn't matter how trustworthy you are. Right. So remember, this whole issue of edut, being manifest in the Torah and giving testimony to something that is already, and yet we're saying the last aspect of Shabbos at its heights is already a embodiment in Shabbos of something that is yet to be.
Right.
So what's happening here? Okay? There's only one being that can swear on what's going to be.
It's Hashem.
Right, because he has the will and he has the means, and his word is true. So if he says it, he's basically telling you what's going to be, right? Okay, so let's see what's going on here. So when it comes to the believability of somebody in court, right? Nobody has any room or any role to be able to be believed at all on future events. The witnessing testimony is only that if you were there, then you can establish it as a fact now because it's something that was. It's always about what was. That's what testimony is about, right? Or maybe what is, right? And it turns out, meaning only God can is believed to testify on what is yet to happen. Right. So now it turns out what's happening with Shabbos in the afternoon, the apex of Shabbos, which is a manifestation of the Yom Shekula Shabbat, eclipses everything so far because everything so far has been in terms of Edut, which is a revelation of Edut of Torah, which is only on the what was. Right. So, right, Edut incorporates that which you know to be true and that's what you saw. We know the Torah to be true, and we saw the Luchot being given, right? We know that Hashem gave us on Friday the man for a double portion for tomorrow, but we see it with our own eyes when it doesn't melt the next day in the morning, okay? So those are the aspects of Edut are played out in Torah, in Shabbos, by Shabbos day. And yet, the biggest import of what Shabbos is, that it's only a me'ain of Olam Haba. It's a touch of everything that's meant to be, which is really the highest point of what Shabbos is able to contain for us in the Shabbos in the now. That doesn't even have any representation or any bearing in how to be enacted in the Edut of Torah, because Edut of Torah is only about what was and not what will be.
So
boom.
Is Hashem the witness then?
God said it's going to happen, but we don't have the tools. There's no vehicle, there's no presence to being able to enact that as witnessing, as testimony on Shabbos.
We can't witness the future.
Right, so in terms of the issues of testimony and how that's tied into Torah, and Shabbos, that's already dealt with by the Su'udah of Shachris. Mm-hmm. So the Su'udot, you still have the inyan of a Su'udah, you have the third reference of Hayom in the Parsha Aman. There is no chiyuv of pat, of eating bread, because the bread is just there to serve the function of what the man did, which is to show the difference between seeing and knowing, right? And you still have the Su'udah, but in terms of the Su'udah is downgraded because of that, because there's no role for lechem, for pat, because there's no role for man, because the Edut is finished, and what's happening, third meal now, that's a downgrade. But what's being experienced in the davening is the upgrade. Okay, we're going to pause here because our wonderful Shalom Tanji Shlita is here to deliver some words. So we'll continue, I guess, next time.
Hazak u'baruch.
Baruch Hashem, Amen.